Hi guys, welcome to Save Game Podcast. Today we're going to be taking a look at my PS1 collection, so let's dive straight in. Now, I'm not going to go into excruciating details about these consoles and the technical specifications, because I'm just not bothered about that kind of thing. For me, it's about playing the games, having a good time, and building memories playing those games. And what better place to start than with the PlayStation? It just looks like a piece of abstract art. It's basic but beautiful in its design. Like Sony knew that less is more. It almost looks like a budget machine. A very clinical, functional design that to this day just makes my heart skip a beat every time I see it. And then came the revision that was actually called PS1. Sony crammed everything from the original into a smaller, sleeker machine that I think is almost as attractive as its predecessor. You can see from the two together just how much they scaled back the casing and just rammed everything inside there. Even to this day, I still use my PS1 for casual playing. The grey one just sits on the shelf looking gorgeous. And here is my customised PlayStation. I did it myself and it's fairly easy to do. The PlayStation is so easy to tear down, it was just a case of dismantling it, cutting the hole in the lid with a jigsaw, spraying it and putting it all back together with a Perspex window lid. And I think it looks pretty cool when it's in action. So that's the consoles in the collection. So let's take a look at some accessories. Of course, there are the valuable memory cards. It was great back in the day when you could just take your memory card round to a mate's house, plug it in, and just pick up where you left off, or even swap and share save files. I have two official Sony memory cards, which is the basic grey one, and also the transparent lime green one, which is just such a 90s thing to have transparent plastic on everything. It's not a look that I prefer, but it is a way of separating my two memory cards, as I do use both of them. I also have a gold HMV memory card and the black Gamester one, which was pretty cool actually, because it's like it had two sides that you could virtually flip to double your save capacity. But unfortunately, third-party memory cards are notorious for being incredibly unreliable. I lost pretty much my entire teenage years from my Gamester memory card because they just corrupt, and taking with it my adolescence. I also have the multi-tap, which allows you to have a 4-way gaming session with your pals for those good old couch co-op days. And the great thing about the multi-tap is each controller slot also has a memory card input, so you can bring your memory card and bring so much more to the fun. Now, for the original PlayStation, I only have two controllers, which is the first version of the DualShock controller, which came packed in with the PS1, the slimmed down version, which is the controller that I pretty much use all the time. And I also have this ASCIiWare controller. I think I'm saying that properly, ASCIiWare, I'm not entirely sure. But I must say that the build quality on this controller is fantastic. I have a couple of other ASCIiWare controllers for other systems. I have a Sega Mega Stick, which is like an arcade controller for my Mega Drive, and they are just so great to hold in your hands. They just feel robust and that they can take a beating. And this controller is affectionately known as the Batarang. And here is my entire game collection for the PlayStation. Now, it's not huge, but it's not the size that counts, it's how you use it. And I have a little rule, and that is I only keep what I'm going to play. As you can see, there's some of the usual suspects in there. There's also some classics too, and also a few that I don't think get talked about enough. So let's take a look at some of my favourites. The first ever game I ever played on the PlayStation was Oddworld Abe's Odyssey, and I actually played it on the pack-in demo disc, Demo 1, and it was just the first level, but I was just infatuated by it straight away, and it was just a game that I had to have. And I just love everything about it. I love the controls, they're so fluid, every button on the controller has a function. You don't have to mess around with too many combinations. The story is just brilliant. You play as Abe and you've got to save all of his kind from being churned up into and made into pies and meat popsicles and things, basically frees people from oppression. And the best thing about the game for me is just the way it looks. I just love the backdrops. They're so deep and immersive, and I just want to visit them. I want to explore them. They have these wonderful sort of matte paintings on the back, and some of them are animated. And I fell in love with this game as soon as I played it. Unfortunately, they had a sequel, Abe's Exodus, and you're seeing both of those games here. Now, the sequel is pretty much the same as the first game, except for slight variations. But again, it's almost like it's an expansion of the first game, and I enjoyed the first game so much I completed it several times. And even with Abe's Exodus, I've played that several times all the way through, and it's just such a satisfying game. It's just got platforming and a light puzzle solving with a bit of action thrown in there as well. It's got to be in my top 5. Don't know what the other 5 are, but it's definitely there. Now, I'm not a big fan of first-person shooters. I only own a couple of them. Alien Trilogy, which we've all played, which frankly just scares the hell out of me. But another one, and it was the first one that I ever played on the PlayStation, and it was Disruptor. Now, you might say that it's a Doom clone, or a Duke Nukem clone, or this clone, or that clone, but I tell you what, it is a fantastic game. It even says on the cover, the mother of all shoot-em-ups. And I don't think it disappoints. And it's one of those games that starts off with horrible live-action, full-motion video. And I never like the look of these things. It always just seems so out of place, because you go from live-action people to computer-generated environments, and I just don't think it mixes well. And also, the acting's usually bad, and the sets look cheap, which they do here. But sometimes in these videos you do see some familiar faces, and in this one at the very beginning you get Vaughn Armstrong, who has been in multiple things over the years. You'll know his face, but I know him particularly from Star Trek Enterprise, where he played Admiral Maxwell. He's also been in a bunch of other Star Trek things as aliens and whatnot. That's the great thing about that program, you can just be whoever you want to be. But if you don't have this game, I seriously consider that you find it and you play it. It's one of the most expensive I've ever bought for the PlayStation 1. Not mega expensive, it's only slightly into double digits, but still, it's one of the games I played as a kid and I just had to find it again and play it again. And here's a third-person shooter, Apocalypse, and you will notice that on the cover is Bruce Willis. His name's on there, his face is pretty much on there. He provides the voice of the main character, Kincaid. And I think it's just such a fun game. I first played it on a demo years ago, and I just kept playing it again and again and again. And then years later, I saw it in a retro game shop, and I went in there and I bought it, and I walked out so pleased with myself. And I went back next week and the store had closed. Bummer. But it is such a good game, and it's got what I think is a unique control mechanism. You obviously use the D-pad to move backwards and forwards, left and right, but to shoot forwards and backwards you press the triangle and the X, and shoot left and right you press the square and the circle. I found it such a strange control scheme at the time, but it just works, and it allows you to shoot round corners without having to endanger yourself. And I do find that in sections it can get pretty tough. Now, I love racing games. They're a big part of my gaming collection, and no less of these is the Wipeout series. And I have the Wipeout series on several consoles, the PS1, 2, 3 and the PSP. But it all started here for me with Wipeout 2097. What a fantastic game. It was always so fast and exciting, and it was just, you could feel the power when you're blowing up stuff. I mean, I struggled hitting the walls a lot because it's just such a fast game. And the soundtrack too was amazing. It just had some great tracks on there. The most memorable of all is Firestarter by The Prodigy. And this is one of those discs that you can put in a CD player and listen to the music on it. So I'd often take it out with me in my car and just drive along listening to these banging tunes. And the feel and the look and the sound of the game carried on through the entire series. Each game that they make is pretty much the same as the last, but it's just so good and enjoyable. Another racing game I have is Crash Team Racing. Now, I've played this a little bit, but it's just one of them games that you need to enjoy with other people, and unfortunately these days everybody's so busy and playing online, it's hard to get people together to just sit and play. But you can play it on your own, and I do from time to time, and it is an enjoyable game. It's basically Mario Kart, and I think that's a good thing, because for those of us who weren't into Nintendo and things like that, it was great to have this alternative that was virtually the same thing we could enjoy ourselves in our own homes. I also found Crash Bandicoot to be a little bit more wacky than Mario, and I kind of like that in a character. Now, people complain about the Phantom Menace as a film. They all say it's terrible, but don't shoot me for this, I actually enjoyed it. It was a great time for a new generation to experience Star Wars fever, and I really enjoyed the game as well. It's a bit clunky in its controls, and the storyline is kind of the scenes between the scenes of the film. It sets you up for a scene in the film, but then you end up just doing some laborious task to get to the next level. But the levels are pretty big and detailed, and it sort of throws in platforming with a bit of action and also some RPG elements in there. You'll die a million times playing this game, but if you're anything like me, you'll probably just spend most of your time running around Mos Eisley, slaying the townsfolk, whether it be shopkeepers, droids, or Tudarians. Another Star Wars game that I own is considered a bit of an oddity, and that's Masters of Terra's Kaisa, or Cassie, however you prefer to say it. And it's a tournament fighter, and it's kind of in the style of that kind of Sega era of like Virtua Fighter and stuff like that. And it's a bit of a clunky game and quite frustrating, because the opponents just seem to be pulling off these amazing moves that just flatten you. But it's a nice alternative to your Street Fighters and your Mortal Kombat and all that stuff, and it's an okay game, but I wouldn't invest too much time in it. But it is a nice one to have in your collection. Another racing game I own, and probably the racing game I spent the most amount of time playing, is Destruction Derby 2. I mean, just look at that cover. It's just full of destruction. And the game is exactly the same as the cover. There's no wool being pulled over anybody's eyes. What you see on that cover is what you get in the game, which is absolute carnage. There are different race modes. There are stock car racing where you just race. There's wrecking races where you race for points by damaging the other players. And there's also Destruction Derby, which is like just this big arena where you just drive and smash into each other and just see how long you can last and try to be the last car standing. It's such a great game. I love it so much. And when I'm bored with nothing to do and I can't decide what game to play, just pick up Destruction Derby 2. It's amazing. Oh boy. Now this is a biggie for me. I love racing games, but I just wanted a driving game where I could just drive freely out and about, just doing my own thing. GTA was out there, but I didn't like the way the game looked. I didn't enjoy it. And then Driver came along, and it just granted all of my wishes. To just get in that car and drive around the streets of Miami or San Francisco or New York, and I spent hours upon hours upon hours just sitting, driving. At one point I had a steering wheel for my PlayStation. I just made things more immersive and more enjoyable. And it's like Abe's Odyssey. Driver had a sequel, and it was virtually the same as the first game. The only difference is you could get out of the car and change cars. But the great thing about these games is you can't actually kill anybody. You mount the pavement and people jump out the way. And I just enjoyed that. There was no aggression in it. It wasn't about killing and destroying and building empires. It was about driving, and that's what I loved, and I still love it to this day. Another great feature about Driver was the film director mode, and you can sort of piece together your own little replay. Now, I never used it too much, but as you can see here, I think it really shows off the capabilities of the PlayStation in terms of its 3D aspect and the way this game is programmed to look when you're doing the 3Ds, because you don't really get that when you're playing it, but when you stop it and rotate the cameras, it just looks great. Now, like the occasional platforming, I'm not fantastic at it, but a game that I played a demo of 25 years ago and then never heard of again until about 6 months ago is Pandemonium. It's such a strange game. The storyline is something like your town has vanished and you've got to go and save it or something like that. I didn't really pay too much attention to the storyline, but it is a really wacky platformer, and it's not so much 2D, it's sort of 3D, because the screen moves and wraps around, and all you got to do is go forward and jump up and down and jump on stuff. And at first it can be a little disorientating, but it's a good game, it's fun. I haven't gone too far into it, but if you got some time, I'd say pick it up, give it a go. Now, I bought Simpsons Wrestling because I thought it'd be a good thing to have in a collection. I've never owned a Simpsons game. I've played a few of them here and there and people seem to enjoy them, so I thought, yeah, I'll start with Simpsons Wrestling. You know those moments where you just wish you hadn't spent £2 on something? And this is it. It's such a bad game. Some of the humour from The Simpsons is in there, but not a lot. I think the characters look bad. The controls are just atrocious. And I just can't seem to get a good move done on my opponent. They're flying out all these special moves and items and whatnot, and they just hammer me every single time. Maybe I'm just not good at fighting games, but this was a real regret. You can choose who to play as from the Simpsons family and a few other supporting characters, but to be honest, I don't think it's really something I'm going to spend too much time on. And unfortunately, one day, it may have to leave my collection. And finally, space shooters. I love space. I love Star Trek, I love Star Wars, pretty much anything with the word star in the title. Even the film Stardust with David Essex in, which is nothing to do with space. But I have Colony Wars, and yeah, it's an okay game. I picked it up because I was interested in getting hold of Blast Radius, which is pretty much the same game. And then somebody recommended this to me. They said it was better, and yeah, I can see how it is. It's flying around shooting stuff in space. What more can I say about it, really? There's a story in there, but I just find that games like this, they don't really need a story. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please share your memories of the PlayStation in the comments below. You can also find us on Facebook at Save Game Podcast. And please remember to like and subscribe. Take care.